Actually, I want to use this to launch off something you were talking about earlier pertaining to the COVID vaccine passports.
Oh, yeah.
And what you brought up something really interesting that immediately was like, nah, you can't be right about that. So let me do this first. We got some news from Fox. Biden administration will not require COVID-19 vaccine passports, White House says. Jen Psaki says there will be no federal vaccinations database. Now, this is kind of to assuage the fears of people who think the government's going to mandate everybody get a vaccine passport, but they've long said we can't do that. We won't do that. The private sector will do that, which is still interesting because I'm not sure the private sector can do that because of a lot of laws that already exist, non-discrimination laws, the ADA, et cetera. But I bring this up because we're talking now about libertarianism, authoritarianism, and what the government is or isn't allowed to do and what we should support. So we'll do a hard segue, I guess, and just because I want you to bring this up. You mentioned that the COVID vaccine passports are not legal because of.
So we have a right to medical privacy.
Wait. Just use the fancy buzzword.
Oh, I gotta translate.
You want to build the suspense.
Build up the suspense for it. All right. So in 1973, the Supreme Court determined that we are entitled to medical privacy, and this was a 7-2 ruling. Roe v. Wade determined that we are entitled to medical privacy. So Roe v. Wade and the vaccine passports contradict each other.
What?
Yeah.
Interesting.
See, I didn't know that, but
yes.
they in their ruling they said
yes,
your medical history is your private.
Yes, they used the 14th Amendment, and they said the government cannot compel you to expose your medical history. Like, we can't control that. We can't. You are entitled to your medical history.
I've heard the 14th Amendment thing, but what would that stop a private company, I guess? Theoretically, I guess you could sue because a private company has no right to your medical history.
Yeah,
denying you a service based on medical history.
I mean,
would be
they'd
a
have
violation
to.
of the ADA.
It's crazy because they'd have to go through you to get it. So they couldn't go through your doctor because that'd be a violation of HIPAA laws if they went through your doctor.
Right.
So they'd have to go through you. So it'd have to be up to you to expose that, but I feel like you could bring a civil rights violation against them trying to make you expose your medical rights to buy milk. Right.
There was a big thing with masks where people started saying that they would print out these fake cards where it's like, I have a medical condition and protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then they would go and walk around, and if someone at a store was like, you gotta wear a mask, I'd be like, no, I don't. I have this card. Okay, sure. Look, the card's not real, but I think the idea actually is.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine if a store was like, you can't come in here because your legs are broken. We don't want to risk the lawsuit if you fall and get hurt.
Yep.
So they say the same thing. Well, we require you to be vaccinated. My medical history and what I can or can't do is none of your business. And that goes into the bigger question of, they've said, if you're pregnant, don't get the vaccine. They said if you have allergies, you got to wait. And, Joe Biden recently announced he's upped the timeline so that every adult can get the vaccine by April 19th. But what if your doctor tells you, for this reason, we don't think you should?
My doctor told me I shouldn't.
Why is that?
Because I have a blood condition.
Interesting. So now you're going to go to a store and they're going to say, you need a vaccine passport. And then you can say, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
What my doctor told me and why is none of your business. And what's going to happen? What do you do?
I'll probably get kicked out.
Well, that would be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Americans with Disabilities Act is very specific with what they consider a disability. Like my blood condition isn't I'm not sure what's on there, so I don't want to misquote it. But I know I couldn't get disability or Social Security or anything from what's the matter with me. So
I wonder if that is required, because if you're also immunocompromised, that should be taken into account as well, because I probably won't get it because I am.
Yeah.
So look, the ADA, adata.org says the Americans with Disabilities Act became law in 1990. The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, school, transportation, public and private places that are open to the general public. The purpose of the law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. The ADA gives civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities similar to those provided to individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, religion. It guarantees equal opportunity for individuals with disabilities in public accommodation, employment, transportation, state and local government services, and telecommunications. So I wonder if they would argue that, so actually it says in 2008, the ADA was signed into law and became effective on January 2009. It's the Americans with Disability Amendments Act. It made a number of significant changes to the definition of disability. The changes in the definition of disability apply to all titles of the ADA. So I have to go through all the changes, but I'm curious if your doctor says, I'm sorry, because of your condition, you are not able to get this vaccine.
She said I wouldn't recommend it. So.
You got to take your doctor's advice.
I know. Yeah. So
for everybody listening, if your doctor says you should, listen to your doctor. If your
Yeah.
doctor says you should, listen to your doctor, because I think, you don't want to be getting advice from people on the internet.
According to that, what you just read, it didn't say anywhere in there that like a restaurant cannot refuse service to someone because of a disability. It sounds like that law doesn't protect
It does.
people.
Public accommodation
Public
means
accommodation.
restaurant.
But it's a private accommodation.
Public accommodation means like a service provided to the general public. So a restaurant is a public accommodation
Because it's a store.
because it's open to the public.
Interesting.
So basically a private shop would be like members only, you can't come in. Public is a sign saying open. So if you're, so if somebody walks into your restaurant, you can't accuse them of trespassing unless you warn them first. If you have a if you have a closed private membership only restaurant and someone walks in, it's trespassing. Typically, you still got to warn people it's trespassing no matter what. But the general idea is if it says open and you're allowing people in, it's a public accommodation. But I mean, actually, it's more nuanced than that. Even a private membership business can still be considered a public accommodation. Like if someone says, I would like to join and become a member, and you say you can't because your disability, then they can sue you and say you're denying them a public accommodation.
Could it be like this is a COVID vaccine only restaurant?
That's what I'm wondering. I really don't know. It depends on the definition of disability. So I would imagine that means some kind of medical condition. And if you have a medical condition that prohibits you from getting the vaccine, this is why we want herd immunity, because some people can't get it.
Right.
Like there was this viral tweet from this woman. She's taking a picture of herself getting the vaccine. She's 14 weeks pregnant. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's real. So again, take it all with a grain of salt. And I absolutely want to make sure I preface a lot of these stories. Don't take one story as evidence of widespread anything.
Anecdote.
Yeah, talk
Yeah.
to your doctor.
I
The
do
point-
personally know a pregnant woman who has gotten the vaccine.
and she's fine.
I haven't heard anything. Yeah.
There you go.
She's fine.
Yeah.
In
never
this
know,
in this
like
viral
long-term.
meme, a pregnant woman gets the vaccine and then a few days later has a miscarriage.
Yeah. And it could happen. It
Jeez.
could be
Right.
honestly miscarriages when they happen. They usually were going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
At 14
sadly.
weeks, though, you're out of the first trimester, which is when 90% happen. And then, so, I mean, it could have just been a coincidence. It could have been related to the vaccine. We don't know that. It could have just been all ready to happen. And
Well,
it happened.
there were in I think the UK, doctors said, if you are a pregnant woman, wait. If you have food allergies, wait.
Yep.
Talk to your doctor first. And so right then, it's like, what are we going to do? Are we going to deny someone access to the buy milk and bread because your doctor says no? I
don't think we should.
I think it's a civil rights violation.
Yeah, I think so too. Human
Yeah.
rights in the way.
Imagine if they were like, you have to weigh a certain amount to come into the store, because we know that obesity is a contributing, causes them large amounts of death every year. So you go to Walmart and they're like, ooh, you're too heavy to come into this store.
Or if someone has the flu.
Like 70 or 80% of COVID deaths were obese.
78%.
Yeah.
Large number.
That's alarming.
Were obese. I mean, and that's why I think America is having such an issue with this, because we're so fat. We're fat guys.
I think
Yeah,
so.
there's a lot of excess. That's sad,
I
and
mean,
such an
yeah.
important part of this puzzle.
If you look at like the Mediterranean, they're not anywhere. And people are like, well, that's because they're social distancing and wearing masks. No, that's because they're not fat.
I saw a meme where it was like two lines going to two different kiosks, and one line was like shots and pills, and the line was saturated. All these people were in, the other one was change in lifestyle. and
Yeah.
nobody was
Yeah,
in
I
line.
saw that. Can we talk about fats on here?
Yeah. hold on. This is interesting. Disability is defined, according to this website, as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. A record of such impairment or being regarded as having such an impairment. That's interesting because the vaccine passport is what would make it a disability. If right now
That's
your
scary.
doctor's like, here's our advice to you, and for your, you were advised because of your blood condition, you shouldn't get it. So that's not a disability. But if they then say all these businesses have to have vaccine passports, all of a sudden now it's restricting you from a major, major access to, services and stuff like that. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then you'd be able to get disability insurance because you couldn't go to the store.
I
Yeah,
wonder
it's a
how
big
that works. You got to
slippery
hire
slope.
someone to do it for you.
I don't know. I mean, my blood condition, I don't create red blood cells. So that's why I'm so pale and why I get winded going up the stairs. But that's mine. And I mean, you can't really see it. You can't really tell. I don't want to, carry a passport around with it that tells, the stranger at the supermarket what's the
They don't
matter
feel like
with me.
sharing.
I mean,
yeah.
So this is the issue I take with the Libertarian Party because the government isn't going to be the one starting the vaccine passports. They're oh no, we can't do it, and they can't. 14th Amendment, great. All these laws, sure, but a private company can. And then what happens? Oh, thank heavens it's not the government. It's just Walmart and Amazon. Amazon, you want to buy something online, it's like before a delivery driver can come to your house, you must prove you're vaccinated. Otherwise, you're putting our drivers at risk.
Yep.
It's like, well, what am I supposed to scan your QR code,
Yep.
enter your vaccine number, and then that's what private companies will do.
Yeah. Well, that's a different. So I was talking earlier about libertarianism, how it's a spectrum from anarchy to constitutionalism. It's just a matter of how much government is necessary and how much government is needed. So, so an anarchist view would just be like, nope, we're just, they can do whatever they want until the cows come home, and there's nothing we can do. And it's like, for instance, it's like with what's going on with social media. Oh, they're like, create another. We're at a point where you need to create another internet. At this point,
definitely.
like you can't create more social media because they do that. Like Parler did that, and what happened?
Gone.
Yeah, so we're at a point where it's like, well, why didn't you just create another internet? And so it's like, okay, maybe Elon Musk will get on that. I don't know, but
Trump.
yeah, Trump could
Yeah,
get
I
on
don't know
that.
about
I mean,
that.
they could happen, but you're going to be bound to those rules too. So it's just a matter of like I said, I'm a minarchist, so I believe in justice and defense. That's really the limits of what I believe to be the government's role for enforcing the Constitution. And so I would have to think at it from that perspective. Okay, so are people like, where's justice gonna, like, are people gonna be, is there gonna be an injustice here? Like if people are not being served, if people can't, is there an injustice? Should the government interfere because of this human rights injustice? Essentially, if you can't have, buy food, or if you can't, like, this is where it gets a little sketchy.
This is why I think the Libertarian Party is pro-authoritarian.
Yes, they are.
They're like the pawns of authoritarian, corporatist, monopolist power.
Yes, they are.
You have massive multinational corporations, and they're going, oh no, the government is being mean to our overlords. It's like, what? If you're actually for libertarian views, the little L, like true opposition to authoritarianism, it doesn't matter if it's a corporation or a government. They're both organizations, just in different capacities. The government is organized. It's an organized group of people who do a thing. A corporation is the same. They have structures. They have a hierarchy. They have control. Some companies are co-ops. Some are nonprofits. Some governments are democracy. Some are autocratic. Some are, you had that guy, what was that name? What was that guy's name in Uruguay? Jose Mujica, was that his name?
I'm not sure.
He was like the president. And he lived in a little farm. He had a little car, and everyone loved him.
Oh,
he was
yeah,
running
I
the
remember him.
Yeah. So you have some governments like that.
Yep.
Government is not the same thing everywhere, and corporations aren't the same thing everywhere. Both can monopolize power and cause problems. I happen to lean against, the reason communism and socialism are bad is because it's a bunch of people sitting down going, I have an idea. Let's centralize all the power with one group of people. And it's like, that's a really bad idea. And then the problem I see with ANCAPs and the Libertarian Party is they're like, we should allow major corporations to slowly accrue power so that a small handful of individual elites control everything. And I'm like, what's the difference if your life is dictated to you by someone else? So we need to restrict corporate power and government power. But we don't get that. We have the left typically being like, the corporations are bad, and the right being like, government is bad. And I'm like, hey, they're both bad.
They're both.
You guys
awful.
are just both awful.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both. Yeah, well, they both are.
just
Yeah.
awful.
Well, if you look at what these corporations are, like, we could have thousands and thousands of competitors. Like, we could have like everybody out there competing against each other. And what was I saying? That there are there's like 10 businesses, 10 corporations that just own everything. They just own everything. And what are some perks that they have? They have, they get billions in subsidies, billions. They get special protections by the government. And then, they buy up their competition. And so there's language in the 14th Amendment for government granted monopolies, which if you're giving them money and you're giving them protections, you're probably granting their ability to exist. Yes. So if there's language against that those should not exist. And it's just not being enforced because too many of these politicians are dirty and they're profiting off these corporations. They're in bed with the corporations.
Well,
so
they're
why
gonna-
are they gonna? Why are they
They're
gonna
going to get a job once they get out of office.
Yeah,
It's
of
a
course.
hard job, man. You're fundraising nonstop.
lobbyists? Maybe. Yeah.
You don't get paid that much money, but then afterwards you get this permanent access pass to Capitol Hill, and all of a sudden now you can do lobbying.
Yep, they can lobby.
These government-granted monopolies, they're supposedly du jour monopolies, meaning by law, the government is like instilling but these aren't du jour monopolies. These aren't like Twitter's not a government-granted monopoly, even though the government subsidizes. To be honest, I don't know what they subsidize with Twitter, but it's a de facto monopoly. They are by fact. It's not by law. They're not legally monopolized. They just have monopolized the social sphere.
If the
Google.
government admits that they're, what'd you say, de jure?
Yeah,
de
du
jure
jour.
monopoly, then they have to abolish them.
Exactly.
So
A lot of,
they're just going to exist de facto.
I hear a lot from the laissez-faire capitalist or ANCAP types, and they'll say things like, Tim, you're not talking about a real capitalism. Real capitalism, you're talking about corporatism and the government's interference, which creates these monopolies. It's only because of special access and special rules that the government holds back the competition and props up these big companies. And that's kind of true with Section 230, for instance. Empowers those that are massive to get away with whatever they want and then destroy their opponents. But I'm like, the idea that this isn't real capitalism just sounds like utopian to me. It's not real communism, sure. That's not real capitalism. I'm like, listen, capitalism is infinitely better than communism in a million different ways. Unfettered capitalism outright will eventually see power coalesce around a small handful of people with or without government regulation. We need to stifle that concentration of power. I don't necessarily know how.
Taxes is one way.
Yeah. The problem is it just powers the government then. You know what I mean? And the government just then grows and becomes massive. And then they effectively just create a revolving door between the massive multinational corporations and themselves.
I mean, you got to elect people who are going to be like, all right, you're a monopoly. We need to call you that. We need to get rid of you.
And also,
They're all puppets at this
Yeah.
the
point.
government's centralized too, which is a problem. They,
Exactly. It's a
know.
monopoly. The government is a monopoly. It's a monopoly on violence and the ability to take money from people.
We didn't have the
And it's
technology.
a bunch of millionaires. More than
Imagine
half.
if Netflix had a group of like people with guns that they would show up at your house and be like, you have to sign up for Netflix, and you're like, I don't want to. Too bad.
Yep, that's what
We're
it is.
here,
That's what
we own it.
taxation is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the government made a social media site and then they were like, you have to sign up.
Well,
you're automatically signed up.
In
your
the
social
in
security
the UK,
number.
you have the TV licensing fee or whatever. Everyone has to pay it, unless you don't have a computer or a TV, and it funds the BBC, I guess.
We're in a weird place where centralized government, it still kind of works. Well, no, I mean, it kind of works, but we're building tech that allows us to decentralize the way we vote, the way we interact with each other via television, internet video, and things like
Nah,
that.
you only think that, bro.
Well, we're on the cusp of like a new way of, like Putin and Biden could get on a YouTube video chat tomorrow and have a 2-hour live stream together.
Sure, that's not decentralization though. That's pure
But
centralization.
Putin doesn't have to fly to DC. We don't have to centralize anymore.
Well, that's
They can-
semantics, bro.
No, we can communicate from
When we're-
afar.
Right. When we're talking about decentralization, we're talking about distributing power between different nodes, not one point. Biden and Putin arguing is pure centralization of power. Then they're talking to each other.
You're talking about spiritually or psychologically.
Yeah.
Putting all the power in an individual, but actually centralizing the like Washington, D.C. used to be the centralized point of our power structure.
Right.
No longer. The government can function from anywhere and probably
Yep.
does.
It does. That's why the people storming the Capitol, it's like, what were you thinking? That was so stupid.
Right.
We're going to enter this building and that's it. It's like, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
It's the internet exists. What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's those people.
So maybe a government, I have a feeling a government will be built that facilitates the technology, and I suppose it's up to the people
I
to build
think
it.
the blockchain stuff is valuable. I think crypto's valuable. But if you think that these technologies are decentralized, I got a bridge to sell you. You think that the U.S. government just sat back and watched Bitcoin grow exponentially and did not buy large portions of the blockchain and set up servers all over the place? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Okay, maybe we can say the U.S. government's inept, and that's possible. But I kind of feel like there's probably confidential stuff we don't know about. We know China was buying tons of Bitcoin. I'd be willing to bet the U.S. tried to buy 51% of whatever network they could, and they're constantly doing whatever they can to maintain control of that network. Because if they got 51%, then they own it. Not decentralized.
Sure. Well, we're not just relying on blockchain. There's other decentralized networks like Interplanetary File System, IPFS, and new ones that keep getting built. And 51% is better than 100%.
Well, no, but what I mean
know
is
what your point.
all they need in order to control 100% of a network is 51% of the computers. They don't
Okay,
even
that's why
need-
I guess why I said on the cusp. We're not at a point where we have a decentralized system yet, but that is a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe, or a light in the distance.
Decentralization would require like interstellar colonization. What effectively allowed us to break away from the British Empire was the distance. 3,000 miles away, it was very hard for them to enforce anything.
Yeah, and if we don't have a decentralized system when we colonize Mars, it will be solar war. So we have to for our survival.
Solar war. I don't know if
We
we
do
do
not
that.
want the first solar war.
I don't know if we'll get to that point
Or the second
because
one.
colonies on Mars or wherever else, they're going to require a stream of supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not going to be able to survive on their own without resources coming in for some time. Maybe in 50 years to 100 years, we'll have biodomes and
We'll be taxing them and be like, we send you your supplies. And they're like, not anymore.
they throw all the space tea into the
Space harbor.
space harbor on Mars.
There's so much
They
iron.
eject it into space.
Yes.
All that iron all that red dust is iron oxide.
Yeah.
There's a lot of iron on Mars.
They make Martian swords with it, send them back to Earth.
That sounds
But then
right.
the military's like, we don't sword fight anymore, so they don't buy them. And then Mars is like, what are we supposed to do? And we need food. And so then we buy them anyway as like a goodwill gesture to like make it seem like we actually are buying something when in reality just like arbitrarily making them work in exchange for resources. They declare independence and they all die.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.